When I got close to the young man, what I realized was he had a pair of scissors and he was stabbing himself in the neck.
Oh,
We had 3,000 um, people there for that hockey game, and a lot of them were children that were being traumatized by what they were seeing.
all right. Doug Grimmett, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Now, Doug, I'd say we've been friends for a while. We were in FBI Defensive Tactics Instructor School together, and that was a very intense school. But the interesting thing that I always found really quite extraordinary about you is this was not a profession that you joined at 21 years of age, like most of our coworkers that we had. How old were you when you joined the police department?
When I joined the police department, I went through academy. I was 2 months away from turning 54 years of age.
54.
Yes, all of my fellow recruits were in their 20s, 30s. I think I had two in their 40s. It wasn't until I retired that I found out that I was the oldest recruit in Colorado Springs Police Department. Um,
In the history, huh?
Very history, yes.
That is amazing. So, what is it? Someone that has lived that amount of time, so 54 years, what was the draw at that point in your life to say, I want to become a police officer? And why not before? Or, what was it about that specific time that made you say, you know what, I want to go that direction?
Well, in my life, I've been very, very blessed. I've had people come and seek me rather than me seek a job
Yeah.
in different companies. And I did have a police officer that called me, and we talked about becoming a police officer one evening. And asked me, she said, why don't you go ahead and apply for it? And I got my papers together and I applied for it. And then immediately I was in the process of, let's see how many we can eliminate to get the best candidates for CSPD. And I ended up doing that. As far as deciding that, I had tech, the training to do a lot within the police department.
Sure.
I was a black belt for martial arts.
Really?
And right after I became a police officer,
What martial arts? Do you mind if I ask?
I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. When I was 11 years old, I was in Washington, D.C. I got a chance to go to a tournament, and the guest for that tournament was Bruce Lee.
Get out of here.
This is true. This is before he did movies. This is when he was on TV with the Green Hornet. But I got a chance to get really close to him, and I got a chance to at least say hello to him. So I wanted to do martial arts, and then Kung Fu came on.
Okay.
And I said, oh, now I want to go to China to learn with the Shaolin. Well, I got a chance to do both. I became a martial artist when I was 16 years old in high school for Kenpo. I went to University of Georgia. There were two styles that I learned there, one Korean and one Japanese.
Okay.
Once I graduated from University of Georgia, I went to Maryland. I worked for Washington Post newspaper and MCI Telecommunications. And I took a Vietnamese style, Bo Bi Dien Hep Tim Mob, and full contact kickboxing. So, and I'm a fourth degree black belt currently, but I had my own school for 11 years, and I trained a lot of young people that now have their own kids and they're adults.
Yep.
But we all stay in contact with each other, and we respect each other for what we contribute.
That's amazing. So, you've been doing that. Obviously, there's a passion for martial arts, and I'm sure that has, you know, like I don't know if you listen to many podcasts. I know on occasion I'll listen to Joe Rogan, and he is an avid. He's done a lot of martial arts, and he said for him it was like a turning point in his life because it helped him gain confidence, and it really went over into other things. But now looking at you, so you had all this martial arts experience, and then you became a police officer. During your time as a patrol officer, did you find that the martial arts was helpful? I mean, that you had to use it much, or was it more Did you do other things? Did you de-escalate? What did that look like for you when you were on the street?
Well, it was on the street. People were waiting for me to do my kung fu on anybody I came in contact with. When you're going to kick them in the head or jump up and things like that. And I tried to explain to them, martial arts isn't like that. The best weapon that you have in martial arts is the one between your two ears
Sure.
and being able to think and de-escalate. If you can get out of a situation and not have to hurt anyone, then you're a good martial artist. So I did that a lot of times. Um, I always was very, very careful who I contacted. But the thing about it is, as far as everyone else on patrol with me, they love for me to be back up because they
Yeah.
knew that whatever happened, I was going to be able to take control of that. But a lot of times it was basically being respectful, um, calming the situation down. And I got compliance with that. And I never had to use my martial arts against anyone.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so interesting how verbal de-escalation in general, I mean, if you take the time, really, it doesn't take too long just to show the person some respect, um, and really try to understand what they're going through. You'll never be able to put yourself in their position. But if you actually try, it's amazing how they could have really bad intentions. But the minute you just provide yourself as kind of the person that wants to listen and cares, yeah, they'll de-escalate right down in a lot of circumstances. Obviously, there are ones that you'll never be able to, unfortunately. But now, I'm sure you have a lot of stories from patrol, and I definitely would love to hear any of those. But I also want to make note that you were a school resource officer as well.
Oh, yes.
Um, and an interesting thing you told me was I had asked you a question about, I think a lot of parents are curious about what is most dangerous to their kids at school. They send their kids out, they think they're going to go to a safe environment. And yet we have stuff happen all day, every day. You'll see at different schools around the country where something violent happens and whatnot. But I'm just curious, from your point of view, because you worked at a kind of a hard school, as that it would kind of be classified. What is the most dangerous thing affecting these kids at school?
Well, as far as danger is concerned, there's many, many things that could happen
Okay.
that are dangerous for the students, the admins, the teachers, even family members that drop their kids off at school. So I know that as far as guns and active shooters are concerned, that's a major um, concern
Yeah.
that parents and the school have. That is one, and I'll address that one first. I was a school resource officer, and I was trained to be a school resource officer. I was responsible for making that environment safe. But here's the thing, as far as armed shooter, I have to look at myself too. I give you a good example of what that I was concerned about. Lunchtime, when the cafeteria was full of students, if someone comes in there and they start shooting, I have to be responsible for every bullet that comes out of my gun. And in that type of environment where a lot of students are there, if you have a person who is an active shooter, I have to be real careful. I just can't shoot within a crowd.
Mm.
And I would have to put myself as a decoy for anybody else threatening the other students so that I could eliminate that threat. So that's one, and that's as far as the guns are concerned. But there were a lot of things that the students would bring to school that
Yeah.
made it unsafe. There were so many students that are arrested for bringing weapons, and those weapons were knives, stars from martial arts. And unfortunately, I had to arrest young people that had semi-automatic guns.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And you had to be careful with that as well because one of the people I had the guns, he had a gun. Um, he had it concealed. And, and I got with the principal. He did have security. I said, let me let you talk to him first because I had another student that told me he had the gun. And he also told me that if I said anything, he's going to know that the young man told me about the gun. So I let them talk. But what ends up happening is when they got him into the room to search, he didn't want them to search him to find the gun. and he started to walk away, and I had to draw my gun down on him, put him against the wall. I took his pants and put him to his knees, and I found a semi-automatic weapon. I made it clear and safe,
Mm.
and then I had to put him in handcuffs. I called his parents to come over, and unfortunately, his father was a big gang member. He had all the tattoos on his face. He said he's trying to change his life right now, but it's a little bit too late for his son. So
Mm.
that was one right there that had to have the weapons, and it could have turned out a lot worse than it was. But the way in which I handled it, it never came on TV. There was no threat that anybody else knew in the school,
Yeah.
which was very, very good. So we continued on like nothing happened that day. But there was something that happened, and I was able to eliminate that threat without anyone getting hurt. The other side of the coin is drugs.
Okay.
And that's the way young people, especially in high school, make money. And, we have marijuana that a lot of parents right now say, well, it's legal, but they don't put it up and they leave it out. And kids make
Uh,
brownies out of it and cookies and things like that. And they bring them to school and they give it to other students. And some of them have an allergic reaction to marijuana.
sure.
There were also students who would bring cocaine to school and they were selling cocaine to other students as well. So you had the drug part about that, but the other negative side with the drug part of it is this. I lost some students because they were selling drugs. And what ends up happening is it's not just students that have the drugs. A lot of time it is adults that is providing the drugs to the students. They want it to get sold by other students in the schools and then bring the money to the people that basically produce that. And, I had some situations that were just a bad situation that some of the students lost their lives
Oh,
because their commitment with people who were providers of the drugs, they weren't paying them back. And I had one student, he got shot, he made it all the way to Memorial Hospital, and he died right there in the parking lot. So you have that drugs, you have the weapons that they're bringing. Um, One of the other bad things that were happening in the schools was this. I had one school that I was working at, and I talked to the principal, and they had one bad thing that was going on, a minimum of 3 fights a week. And
no
those three
kidding.
fights, yeah, those 3 fights ended up in students having their teeth knocked out and other injuries that they had to go to the hospital with. And I had to start intervening and start charging these students for
Mhm.
fighting in the school. I tell you what happened. A lot of times their parents would give them this type of information. If somebody hits you, you better hit them back. And they were putting their children in jeopardy. So what happened was when I would send a ticket for them for fighting, the parents would have to come. And so I took them away from their jobs and everything else. And then things started changing because of the consequences. And the consequences wasn't just for the children, the consequences what the parents had to feel as well.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned something to me when we were talking a while back, and that was gangs. But more than that, it sounded to me you had a story that you told me about um, how you treated a lot of these kids with respect that were gang members, and they respected you a great deal. And they told you they wouldn't do anything bad, but then they ended up doing it. And their reason was because had they not acted the way they did, their own gang would have attacked them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got that right. That was another part is when you asked about the danger in the schools. I dealt with a lot of gang members.
Sure.
And what ends up happening there is you mess with one, you mess with all of them.
Okay.
And I did have a good rapport with the gang members. One of the things I did was treat them with respect because when you don't get that respect, that's where you have an issue. The other part of it was I gained their trust. So they would listen to me and they respected me a great deal as being a police officer. But I had run-ins with them as well. I remember I had some of the gang members in my office as a SRO, and I said, "Look, guys, it's not against the law to be in a gang, but we're not going to have any of this gang stuff here on the campus." And they said to me, "All right, Officer Grimmett, we'll keep it on the down. We heard about you." I said, "Well, what did you hear?" He said, "Well, we heard that you're cool." I said, "Well, I'm cool, but if I have to, I will arrest you." And they said, "We understand that. You have to do what you have to do." And it wasn't, too long after that, there was a gang fight right there on campus, and I mean a big gang fight. And I got the guys that started it, brought in my office,
Yeah.
and they started apologizing to me. And I said, "What are you apologizing for?" They said, "Well, we let you down. We said there wasn't going to be any issues with us on this campus, but we got into a situation if we hadn't retaliated, and we had to go back to our gang, and they would have beat us up." And I could understand that as well. But that part was a bad influence. And you have, like I said, adults that are looking at juveniles and they're saying, well, you can make some money, we're going to protect you and everything else. But it's to get them into the gang, and then other bad things and threats to the campus start appearing.
Sure. Let me ask you, when it comes to some of these kids that are in gangs, um, have you ever been successful at maybe helping them to choose something else other than the gang, or maybe go a different direction? Or is it more once they're in, it is so hard to extract them from that lifestyle? Because I can't imagine it's easy for these kids, especially, I mean, let's be honest, some of them may have parents or it's a single parent household, but a lot of them aren't cared for. And then it's amazing how someone extends their hand and it happens to be a gang member, but they say, hey, you can be part of this family. We'll care for you. And to someone that doesn't really have a stable household, or they don't believe anyone cares for them, that's a very lucrative possibility. Like, I get a family, I get a brotherhood, and yet on the back end, that's when this stuff starts happening. So have you ever seen it where maybe someone started out as a gang member, but then by the time they're getting ready to leave high school, maybe they changed? Or what was your experience with that?
Well, the first thing is they chose to be a gang member.
Yeah.
There are consequences to go with that. There was one young man that was at the high school, and he wanted to get out the gang. Unfortunately, the gang would not let him get out of it, and they broke his ribs. And so he went to class holding his ribs, knowing that he was in a lot of pain. And I tried to help him a great deal on that. Unfortunately, he didn't get out of the gang. He was 16 years old. He ended up getting this young lady pregnant, and he dropped out of school, and so did the young lady. And that was at the end of the school year. Next thing I know, during the summer, there's a BLO for him and a warrant for his.
What is a BLO?
Be on the lookout.
Oh, okay.
And the reason they were looking out for him is that he was being charged for homicide, shooting someone and taking their lives.
Sure.
And I went to the detention center for young people. There was another student I had brought there because he had weapons that I had to arrest him. And I saw that young man coming down the hallway in his orange suit with another sheriff deputy there escorting him. And I saw him, and I asked the deputy, I said, can I touch him? The deputy, I don't know what he thought I was going to do. He said, yeah, you can touch him. And he came over to me, and I hugged him. And I said, how you doing? He says, I'm doing okay. I've been here for 3 months now. He said, my girlfriend just had a baby girl. I haven't had a chance to see her or anything. And I just told him, just hang in there. We'll see what happens. I just wish you luck. I had another student. He was a young man. Even when he was before a teenager, he got meth, and he started taking meths from friends and gang
Really?
members
Before he was a teenager?
before he was a teenager.
Wow.
And he also had relatives that were in the gangs as well. And they were doing the drugs, homicide as well. And I gained his trust, his respect. I remember one time he was having an issue in the school, and I picked him up. And I know I did this, but I picked him up purpose against the wall. The security guard says, Doug, his feet weren't touching the ground. I said, but I didn't hurt him. I just kind of scared him, anything like that. But he used to come to school and says, this school sucks. Everybody in this school sucks. And he looked at me and said, but you're a cop. So I did have a good relationship with him. And
Yeah.
he didn't finish school. I had another young man. He just wanted to get in fights all the time and be a bully.
Sure.
And here's the thing that kind of hurt me was when I talked to his father told me that his son is going to end up either dead or in jail or both. And unfortunately, the young man did graduate from high school, but that summer he ended up being shot by a police officer for armed robbery.
No
And,
kidding.
a lot of this could be taken care of if just the parents would be parents and stop saying negative things to their kids and the consequences, but getting them out of that situation where they make good decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can only imagine. I mean, how can that be changed? I guess that's the thing that is the big question mark when it comes to that. Because I agree with you 110%. Like the parents are the factor that kind of determines the direction a child's life goes. The child will make their own, decisions at some point. Um, but then again, they look to the parents to try and see what does a stable person look like, or a good person. And if you have these family members that are in the gangs as well, if you have, if it's again a single parent household and maybe that parent is always working and you're left to your own thing, um, I think it can be hard for a kid to make the right decision sometimes. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's an answer there somewhere. I don't know if it's something that I'll ever fix or you will as well. But um, when it comes to just veering off ever so slightly, we brought it up before. So gangs and drugs in schools. But I also think you would agree that something you see almost every day on the news are active shooters.
Mhm.
Um, so as a school resource officer, how do you guys prepare for that? How are you trained for that? Or what do you do to make sure that your school is protected in the best way possible?
Well, school resource officers have to go through training for
Okay.
active shooters every year. I mean, at the end of the school year, we go to the high schools here in Colorado Springs. Instead of just having one place, we go to all the different schools and we find out the floor plans, where they're at, um, um, places where they meet
Hmm.
on a large basis. And we train as individuals and we can train as teams. So we learn how to be able to identify the threats. Do we hear gunfire, anything like that? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a gun. They have knives and everything as well. So we have to identify the threat, and then we contact that suspect, and then we eliminate the threat. Now, eliminate the threat may mean that we have to do fire upon fire, or sometimes they will comply, and we end up arresting them as well. But we go through that every year. One of the things that I was always concerned about was this. I had an office in one of the high schools, and it was right next to the cafeteria. And every time I'd be in the office, I always anticipate hearing gunshots and have to address that.
Sure.
And the difference between being on patrol and being a school resource officer is we are there in the school. So when anything happens, it's very different from dispatch, having a call and sending officers to the school. We are at the school and it's real time. If you start to have gunshot or there's a threat, we have to be able to address that and get rid of the threat immediately.
Yeah.
And I think I told you about Columbine. That was a time when officers could call for backup and wait for someone, be there. You can't do that anymore. Up here, as a responsibility to the school and making sure that everyone's going to be safe. Anytime there's an issue, we must address it immediately. You can call for backup, let people know what's happening, but you can't let gunshots continue on and lives be taken away because you're waiting for someone else to back you up.
Sure. And so I guess that does bring up the question that we had a few years back, that shooting in Texas at Uvalde. Um, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, and I'd agree with you, is clearly it was a failure of law enforcement. They knew there was a shooter in the school, but those people that were on scene first, they didn't go after the threat. They just waited outside, which led to more and more kids being shot. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, you choose to be an SRO, and there are consequences in that. I have a family. I have my children who are now adults, and I have grandchildren. I love them very much, and I want to be a part of their lives. But I made a commitment, and the commitment was I would make it safe in the schools for students that I don't even know anything about except for when I see them in their classrooms.
Yeah.
Those officers were supposed to be there to make sure that the other students were safe. And as far as their safety, that comes down
Yeah.
below anything else because they made an oath that
Yeah.
what they would do is put themselves in jeopardy to ensure that other lives, for especially children, teachers, anyone else, would be secure. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry it ended up that way. If you don't want to be an SRO and take that responsibility, you should never sign up for that job.
That's right. Or a police officer in general.
Yeah.
I mean, that is your job. Yeah. So when it comes to SROs, I mean, obviously you were doing a lot for the school, and I know our SROs all across the country, the school depends on them. I mean, that's one of the things that they need to keep their students safe. So I guess my question is, why is it that we keep having active shooters, or what can be done better at schools in general to maybe deter some of these shooters? Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, some of them are that can be achieved by parents.
Yeah,
There's no reason for a child to have a handgun or AR-15 rifle or anything like that. I understand people want to have hunting, but some of these shootings that we have for other students that are there,
mm,
those are weapons that are being provided by their parents. And if they want to do that, then they have to take the responsibility of securing them at all times and knowing what's going on, taking the ammunition away from them until they actually supervise what's going to happen with that. The other side is the school itself. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I went back to my high school, and they have two SROs there, but they also have metal detection. Um,
oh, the metal
yeah,
detectors.
they go in there and they can find out if you have a weapon or anything like that.
Sure.
We don't really have that here in the schools that I've worked at, but you have to be overly cautious right now.
Mm.
And it's not always just the students, sometimes it's people from outside the school.
Yeah.
And you have to provide some security for people that we don't even know getting into the school. A student comes in, he's kind of late, he opens the door, he sees someone else he's never met before. They say, "Can you hold the door for me?" And they get in.
Hmm. Yeah. When I was in crime prevention and I was doing security assessments for different schools and for different government buildings and things like that, we would look at it, from any point of view. So how do we stop someone from trying to burglarize the building? How do we stop, different types of activity like homelessness around the building, blah, 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 blah. But one of the things that we would look at, me in particular, active shooter, right? Because it can happen anywhere. But schools were big, and I would be called to these schools. And I got to tell you, one of the things that was scariest for me, and also kind of disappointing, if I'm being completely honest, is I won't name any of the schools, but there were a few that I went to that I would tell them that they were deficient, right? I would go through their school. I would look at all of their processes. How do students get in? How do they get to class? What are the safeguards that are in place around the school in case something happens? And, when do they lock the doors during class and stuff like that? And I would go to them and I'd say, okay, here's what I think you need to improve. And what was a regular discussion, me telling them what they need to improve, a lot of times I would get this one answer that just bothered me. And that one answer is, well, we don't want to scare the students or their parents, so we're not going to put any of that in. And I would sit there and I'd say, so wait a minute, you would rather your students be vulnerable to a potential shooter than actually do something. Put in metal detectors is a great example. That would probably restrict the access of someone bringing a handgun to school, but they would view that as it was too scary for the students. There was one time in particular, I actually was called and I was asked, this was a middle school, to do a presentation on it. So the presentation was called How to Be a Good Witness. And essentially it was, how do you properly report what's going on so the responding officer knows exactly where to go? And it's supposed to streamline the process to make it really easy for us to get there and go after the appropriate person. And so I'm giving them this. Well, for adult instruction, I don't like death by PowerPoint, but what I would have is I'd have some activities, And so one of the things I was trying to get across to the group, these were all teachers, by the way. So teachers and a principal. And on my screen, I had a picture of an AR platform rifle and a handgun. Okay. And I was trying to let them know, you probably may not know exactly what the shooter's using, but the terminology that we use is we have a long gun and a short gun. I was like, if you can at least tell us whether they have one long gun and two short guns or something like that, that'll help us. And the principal interrupts me and he goes, "Officer, that right there, you're showing guns in our school. You are making all these teachers afraid. I want you to go to the next slide." He says that right in the middle of it. And I stop and I'm like, we're training on something that could potentially happen. Like, you need to be prepared for this. And you're telling me you're afraid of this. So I said, you know what? You got it, Mr. Principal. I go to the next slide. Well, the next slide was an activity. It showed a bunch of gang members pointing guns at the camera. And then I said, okay, well, who wants to volunteer to pretend that they're calling dispatch, and how would you report this? And the principal was irate with me. At one point in time, I believe he got up and he left the class because he felt that I was putting these teachers in fear. And again, it was just pictures and activities to help them understand how they report it. And so I guess one of the things that I really kind of, it just concerned me a great deal is, again, these principals, they want everyone to think that it's, Candyland. It's all sunshine and rainbows. And yet they know they're deficient, but they're afraid that maybe their job is going to be on the line if they want to do something, put in some sort of security device or something like that. So the other one that I would get pretty commonly is funding. They would say, well, we don't have the funding for that. Now, I would try to tell them that there are different federal grants that they can tap into to try and get some of these things. But at the end of the day, doing nothing, all you're doing is putting your students in jeopardy. Like, we can find the cheapest possibility and start working forward from there. But that was my experience on doing a security assessments at some of these schools. Now, other schools, they were completely the opposite. They're like, give me the list. And then the next day, boy, they'd have everything on order like that. I've talked to a few schools and they were like, well, what do you think about our teachers being armed? Right. And I mean, there are going to be some parents and some citizens that are very uncomfortable with that. At the same time, there have been many proven incidents where a civilian who's been trained in how to use a firearm stops an active shooter before law enforcement gets there. So it could very much be a benefit. And it's one of those things. But again, doing something versus nothing, right?
Well, the thing of what you just said was another decision by a principal.
Mm.
And as I said, they get paid to make decisions, but there are consequences for those decisions as well.
Okay.
The thing about it is, as I said, I had a very good relationship with the students that I was protecting, and a lot of them would tell me things that
Okay.
they witnessed, and that was the only way I could make sure that they were going to be safe and get rid of that threat. Right now, we have a big problem in Colorado Springs: juveniles breaking into cars.
Yeah.
As far as responsibilities are concerned, people who have the cars, they sometimes leave their weapons right there in the console. So as the students break into the cars to do the theft or whatever else, they also are arming themselves.
Mm.
And what ends up happening is they have a power that the other students don't, and they can threaten the other students by something that other students don't. The thing about it is, one, we got to come up with a way that the juveniles don't get those weapons to begin with.
Sure.
Two, if they're coming into the schools, and we can have the drive-bys as well, that they're not utilized. But it is responsibility of the schools to make sure that their students are safe.
Yeah.
Once you have a parent that drops the kids off, the expectation is they can pick them up after school, and they won't have any issues that come up that would jeopardize their lives. But like I said, the consequences are very great. If somebody doesn't take responsibility for it, then there's going to be a lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were moving back before SROs, when you were a patrol officer, what led you the direction to wanting to become an SRO? I mean, what did you experience as just a basic patrol officer?
Well, I love being a patrol officer. The camaraderie of the other officers, that was something I looked forward to. We joked around each other. We looked out for each other. I was always there for a backup.
Yeah.
regardless if I was called by dispatch to be one or if I was in the neighborhood. I always try to make sure the other officers are going to go home safely as well. But I wanted to learn. I want to be a good officer. And I remember when I first became a patrol officer, I had to work Friday, Saturday, and Sundays and get off like a Tuesday and Wednesday of the week or something like that. I asked to be an officer at night from 9 p.m. to 7 in the morning. I asked to be an officer that I could be on call on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because on Tuesdays and Saturdays, what do people do at night? They go downtown to the bar, they get drunk, and then bad things happen. I arrested quite a few officers. I'm sorry, uh,
Student.
the students,
Yeah.
not just students, but just regular people that
Oh, okay.
they had gone to the bar or gotten alcohol and they were intoxicated still driving.
Yeah.
And I had bad situations where I had people get hit by the vehicles, and it was because people were drinking. So I tried to learn as much as I could by just being there. And then after I got the experience and the knowledge, um, I said I want to work more with young people so they make good decisions rather than the consequences of bad decisions.
Mhm.
And so I ended up being a mentor for some, and a lot of them, they told me things they really wouldn't talk to their parents about. And I tried to help them understand and be there for me. And they would tell me, Oscar, we talk and tell you more things than we talk to our parents about. And,
Yeah.
even now I'm still being a mentor to a lot of young people, but, having that effect on young people that they make good decisions, they can do well in school and see how important that is. It takes a different person to do that.
Sure.
And a lot of times parents look for their uh, school teachers to help them out. But a lot of times when I was SRO, the teachers and the admin were asking me to help them out. And I got into situations where I had gang members that would curse out the principal, threaten the principal, and everything else. And, I would just take them to the side and talk to them, and things would change. I
Mm.
had one juvenile that he didn't like cops, and he didn't like
Okay.
the administration, but he listened to me. And I said, "Why are you listening to me right now?" And he said, "Well, first I didn't trust you, but things have changed. And if you can reach out to someone and they trust you and they know that you respect them and they know that you're looking out for their best interests, changes can come."
Good. Outstanding. Well, so how, let's call out the elephant in the room. And I got to say, I'm very impressed about this. Doug, how old are you?
Gosh, this is embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing.
68. I have 2 more years, no, 2 more months, and I'll be 69 years old.
Let me tell you something. So there's a reason I asked that question. When I contacted you, right, we started talking and you started telling me about some of the things you're doing now that you're a retired police officer. And man, I want to hear about all the exciting things. One of which you told me you're still at 68, almost 69 years old, teaching defensive tactics to future police officers. Tell me about that.
Well, when I retired from the police department, I was approached by two other law enforcement agencies. One, Colorado College.
Okay.
We had one of our law enforcement lieutenants that was working there. And they said, "Doug, we have an opportunity for you. We have a lot of great speakers at Colorado College, nice programs there as well. And if you would like to be a campus security officer, we would love to have you." And I said, "I can do that. There's no schedule or anything. I didn't want to work 20 hours a week or anything like that, but it's at my convenience." And I did get a chance to be at one of the ceremonies that Oprah Winfrey was there. I was with one for Liz Cheney. I got a chance to see Angela Davis and some other really, really good speeches and events that they had at the college. Um, we have a very good hockey arena at Colorado College.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one.
It's very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to not just go in where the seats are and just make sure that everybody's behaving themselves. They selected me to work with the referees on the ice, and I would escort the referees from their room to the ice, and then from the ice back to their room where they changed. and then after the game, make sure that they got to their vehicle safely.
Hmm.
And this was the second year I think that they had the hockey arena, and I was on the ice, and I saw that the two teams were going to their respective boxes, and the ice was almost clear, and I saw the referees in their white and black shirts on, and I saw this one young man, but he was a student, just walking on the ice. And one of the referees came to me and says, "Doug, we need you." And I said, "Okay." So I just had my regular shoes on. I was walking over the ice, trying not to fall on there. When I got close to the young man, what I realized was he had a pair of scissors and he was stabbing himself in the neck.
Oh,
We had 3,000 um, people there for that hockey game, and a lot of them were children that were being traumatized by what they were seeing.
yeah.
And so after I got close to him, I said, "Well, that changes things." And the young man started, walking around on the ice. He did one bad thing. He turned his back to me. And so I grabbed his forearm where he had the knife. I took him down, but I cradled him. So my legs were around him, but I was on the ice, my back, to make sure that he didn't get hurt. And then the referees came over and they kind of got around me because the threat wasn't against them anymore.
Mm.
And so we had an officer was there. He came and handcuffed him and put him in a AMR vehicle and took him down to Memorial Hospital for an evaluation. And everybody clapped for me. I didn't think it was such a big thing, but I got a lot of good accolades, and it was appreciated that I was there for that night because a lot of different things could have happened.
Yeah.
And because this guy had a weapon, he could have gotten tased. They could have taken him down and he could have gotten hurt and a lot of other things. But I still had this mentality that young people can still be saved. And, it worked out really good. The good thing about it was the coach gave me an official jersey and everyone, hockey players, they signed it for me. He gave me some other cards for meals and all kinds of stuff. My wife was there, and he had her sitting to the VIP lounge, and she got everything that she wanted. She didn't even do anything,
Yeah.
but it came out to be a good ending for the school. The other one is I'm still teaching arrest control for Pikes Peak State College,
No
and
kid.
this is my third year doing that. And the pleasure it gives me is this. I can give them knowledge, but I can't give them experience. I said that's going to take time and the wisdom how to act. But I've been doing this for so long that it's not just what I teach, it's what they need to look out for as well. So we're getting some really, really good officers that will be reporting, all around in some of these areas in Colorado for sheriff department, police department. And, they appreciate, what is happening, what they're actually experiencing. And I run into a lot of them. I even ran into one guy in Cripple Creek.
Really?
Yeah. And then, he came up to me and shook my hand and hugged me and everything. I said, "Oh, you got a job." I was at the Air Force Academy. And we were having a golf tournament. And, you have to go in, show them your ID, and they check your car to make sure you don't have weapons or anything. And so I saw one officer who's in a black shirt and black hood, hat. And I gave him my ID. He looked at it and said, "Are you still teaching arrest control at Pikes Peak State College?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Just go on in. You trained me as well." And I said, "Wow, this is a small world." But I never realized how many young people I trained to make sure they were going to be safe and get home.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that you still do it. I can't think of a better person to actually go and train a lot of these guys coming up, especially with your mindset. Going back to what you said at the very beginning, um, I just think it's great that you can give someone all these tools, but remind them that the best outcome is not having to get in that physical confrontation. What can you do before you even get to that point? Yeah. Um, so arrest control. Now, obviously, there was a version that you and I learned when we went through instructor school, and I'm willing to bet, considering that's been, 8 years ago now, that it has changed significantly. Just for the people that don't maybe fully understand or don't have any knowledge of arrest control, what's included in that? Like, what does that look like for, are you teaching different types of martial arts? Are you teaching restraints? Are you teaching ground fighting? I mean, what is it that goes into that?
Well, when you and I were doing our training from the FBI
Mm-hmm.
for arrest control and defensive tactics, it was the FBI's method. At Pikes Peak State College is Krav Maga.
Okay.
And so, I've been in martial arts since I was 16 years old with a lot of different types of martial arts. I have to put everything else to the side, and I have to be respectful for CSPD as well as the Pikes Peak uh, State College, and I have to look at what they're doing because I don't want to teach somebody something that if they get in trouble for it and they ask, well, where did you learn that? Well, Officer Grimmett taught me this because he knows another martial art. You can't do that. You have to be respectful for the school. But with arrest control, we teach them how to be safe again. And we tell them that the biggest time they're in jeopardy is when they put the cuffs on and when they take the cuffs off. And so I tell them things that hopefully they will remember, like, once you take the cuffs off, what do? Create distance. But once you address someone, then what do you need to know? You need to know, is it dangerous or is it safe or whatever else? But we teach them ground fighting. We teach them weapon retention, weapon, when you take the weapon away from you, disarming, how to handcuff. Right now it's controversy as far as people are laying on their stomach, getting arrested that way, but that's another area for safety for an officer is concerned when you don't know if they have another weapon or anything else. You have to make sure they're going to be safe as well. But, what we learned in FBI is very similar to that, but it's Krav Maga and not what I learned in my other martial arts or at the academy.
So looking at this version with Krav Maga, where does it fall when it comes to, obviously a lot has happened since 2020 and we had the death of George Floyd. Prior to that, when we were in the FBI Academy, they were teaching the neck restraint. What does it look like now? Do you guys teach anything like that on how to restrain a person in that manner? Or has that all been kind of set aside for other different restraints and holds?
Well, as far as a police officer is concerned, a choke is deadly weapon. So you can't just go and choke somebody, but they can choke you.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you can get out of that choke and still do your job. That was a shin over the guy's neck and throat, and he couldn't breathe or anything like that. We don't do that, but we can put a shin across the shoulder, the outside of the shoulder. It's not their spine, it's not their throat or neck or anything like that. It's basically put it on the shoulder part. Sure. If we have them in a prone position, that is acceptable. But when we teach them that, we also have to give them caution. They have to breathe. If it's uncomfortable for them, you need to get up off of them. So we try to make that part safe as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And especially that you're reinforcing the breathing thing. I think it was always on our department, it was always policy, regardless of what a person has done, the minute they say they can't breathe, you get them in the recovery position. Now, they may still try to fight you, and you have to figure out a way to negotiate that, but the recovery position, and then you get medical coming to look them over, make sure that they're doing okay. So I think it's good that you're instilling it in them early. And at the academy that you're teaching, that's prior to them getting any conditional offer on an official police department. This is more of like a college level class, or
it's college.
College. Awesome. Okay.
But the thing about it is I tell them that when they make an arrest, they are responsible for how they handle the suspect.
Sure.
You can't just hurt them or anything. You have to be respectful for them as well because they want to get home too. I don't want to put an officer in jeopardy, but you just can't overreact.
Absolutely.
And use excessive force when you're trying to get them to comply, and then they're deciding they will comply.
Well, and especially when you're the professional on the call. Yeah, I think people are going to call you names and try to fight you, but you're the professional at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, I got to tell you, man, this has been great. Thank you for satisfying my curiosity on a lot of the school resource officer stuff. I think it'll be good for a lot of our viewers that do have kids that are still going into school right now. That being said, man, again, I just want to say that you are an impressive human being doing what you're still doing. I have nothing but respect for you, and I really enjoyed working with you, and I'm glad we've remained friends over the years. So thank you for your time today. For our viewers, Thank you for watching. I hope you found this very informative, as I have. And we will see you on the next one. All right.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mugshot Podcast. Like and subscribe where you can, and I look forward to